In Matt Dinniman's new book, Operation Bounce House, he continues to be what I think of as the greatest ambassador of lit RPG to normies like me. If you don't know what lit RPG is, it's a new genre, relatively new, and stories within that genre that basically use gaming as the frame for the story. Sometimes a book that is lit RPG will make a lot of assumptions about what the reader knows, and other times it will be kind of a portal fantasy where it pulls people into a new world, which is the game, and then explains how everything works. And then in the case of Operation Bounce House, this is a science fiction novel that never outright says this is what it is, but it definitely is using the mechanics of lit RPG because it's following kind of the same trope. Like when I first heard about this book, I thought, "Oh, that's like that movie Gamer from 2009," which I don't remember a lot about, but I do remember that it had people controlling bots or mechs in a game world where they're basically fighting. It's kind of a running man with criminals. So you've got people at home playing the game, and it basically takes like Call of Duty into the real world. And it was probably trying to make a statement about video game violence or the way people experience violence in a game and how that might translate to the real world. And I think Dinniman is definitely aware of that in a lot of ways here in Operation Bounce House. But just like Dungeon Crawler Carl, while the bad guys are bad, there are plenty of people on the bad guys' side who are kind of caught up in a system doing bad things who don't seem to really understand how what they're doing is bad. This is a book with a lot of contemporary themes. It's got a lot of things about our current world that I think it wants to say, and it's doing it through science fiction. It's fast paced, it's got likable characters. Like other lit RPG stories, the characters level up over time. And in Operation Bounce House, our main character, Oliver, is not a complete loser, which is one of the sort of tropes of lit RPG, but he's a guy who is aimless, doesn't quite know what to do with himself, cannot make a hard decision about asking his girlfriend to marry him. And he definitely lives in a world, it's a colony, they're farmers, they're trying to build this their planet, their home, like create a home for the people after them. And they are part of a continuation of people who left Earth in colony ships. And several times it's mentioned that the colony ships were a combination of criminals who did not want to volunteer and scientists and dreamers and people who did volunteer. So in a way, it's very much kind of like Australia. Like he never outright says that that's what he's going towards, but the way it's described and I think the attitude of the people, like there's really just a lot to like about the new Sonorans. All that plays into, I think, pulling people into this story because it also really is balancing on a lot of ideas about being an individual, but part of the community, to stand up for your community, to fight against an oppressor, to try and repel an oppressor. It also has a lot of things it wants to say about othering people and what happens when you try to scapegoat a group and how people in power are always going to be trying to create an outgroup that you can attack and blame for the problems of what's happening, with the government. I think one of the challenges here is that we don't get to see a lot of Earth. Like the colonists always distrust Earth for reasons, but we don't get to see a huge amount except that it apparently, this major corporation, Apex, is ultimately running a game to clear the colonists off the planet. I don't think it's a spoiler to say that. It says it in the blurbs. The story opens with like an initial problem. Oliver has a hangover. He's getting zapped by what seems like the family bot that's there to help them run the farm. And he needs to go find one of the bots that has gone down and he needs to go help find it. So from there, the story unfolds and they discover that mechs are appearing on the planet and basically committing genocide. And as they try to figure out what's going on, they discover that the mechs are being run by gamer kids, and they quickly realize it's gamer kids back on Earth. And I shouldn't just say kids because throughout the book, it's sort of revealed that it's a lot of people. It's everybody that plays games. is getting pulled into this. And there are even scenes later in the book that describe what it's like. There's a really cool shift at the end of the book where we get to see things from the gamer's point of view and what that looks like, and how the corporation is pushing basically everything that is bad about this scenario. If you're coming to this as a more seasoned science fiction reader, like, you may have a lot of questions about, well, how do the colony ships work? What star are they at? Like, we know where the stars are now, so if this is in our future, I'd like to know maybe more about that. It's more about the why and what the characters experience. The how is not as important. We're in their lives, seeing through things through their perspectives, and these are people that are really focused on the mission of what they're doing. They feel that they're part of a continuum of the people that left the earth and making their planet a better place. And now these people are coming to the world and basically trying to wreck everything that they have done, and they don't know why. So this is a mystery that propels the story. Different characters are going to level up, which is a trope in lit RPG. And that's really gratifying to see as they start using the tools they have to fight back in typical Dinniman style. It's just a lot of funny gamer stuff. Although I will say that if I was going to recommend a book to someone, like to introduce them to Matt Dinniman, I would still use Dungeon Crawler Carl. I mean, this book is a standalone. I found myself like, while it's a fully wrapped up story, I just wanted more. And Dinniman is so good at that. He creates characters that you quickly identify with, that you like, that are caught up in a scenario that moves quickly. And you never feel like this is a story that's treading water. Like, it is moving fast. It's got some techniques that create a mystery at the end that the whole time you're really not quite sure what's going to happen to these people. And I think I was thinking to myself, like, I please don't make it that this bad thing happened. Like, there's some found footage that is one of the ways that Dinniman uses to tell the story about people. And so the problem with found footage is that, unlike you know, an epistolary story told through letters or told in flashback, like, the thing about the Sun Eater series is that it's told in flashback by the main character, and so there's sort of implicit there that he survives. So no matter what happens, he's around to tell this story. Whereas when you have found footage, you never quite know what's going to happen, right? In fact, it's there that, well, they weren't around to share the story. It's You've got to go through the found footage piece of it to figure out what happened. So Oliver is a lot of things, like, a lot of times in lit RPG, like, the character might be a complete loser, or they're working a dead end job and they get pulled into this fantasy world and have to, have to level up and learn how the world works. Well, Oliver he's competent. He is a good person. He's a drummer. And so Dinniman is a musician. And I'm sure it's deliberate, obviously, that he chose that Oliver is a drummer, but there are certain tropes about drummers. If you've been in a band, like, Oliver is a pretty high energy guy. He's skilled, he's smart, he's just kinda aimless. Like, he is really good at the things that he can do that are in front of him, but the why of it is not necessarily lost, but he's just not sure where he is at this point in his life. He needs to make a decision about, does he wanna commit to his girlfriend or not? There are some built-in things in the society where, for a long time, they couldn't have kids because there are some issues with the environment on the planet. They had to do some genetic engineering so people can survive there. And so now I think, and the book doesn't really get into this a lot, but there's one character who's pregnant and she's frustrated how she gets sidelined in the story, but she's the kind of helps to illustrate what everybody is dealing with here. Like, we need to have kids because we want to populate the planet. It's not going to get into the politics of that. Also, if we've got the tech to build wormholes and to travel to distant worlds, like, it doesn't ever even entertain the idea that there might be artificial wombs or other things like that. If you're a seasoned reader of this sort of thing, well, a colony ship that's going to do all, X, Y, and Z, but don't don't worry about that. I would say the story just keeps moving, and it's got the characters are fun. So really, the other things, like, if you went into Avatar thinking, like, well, wait a second, why are they doing any of this when they have the tech to do this? Just shut up and look at the beautiful visuals and get caught up in the story, because that's really what this one's about. And it moves fast. It's easy to like the characters. there's enough of the story there, just like a video game, that it drops you into the scenario, and now it's time to play. And so as the story unfolds, you learn more about really everything that happened with the colonies, like why they distrust the Earth. There's also a side plot what that becomes more central about AI that is very much talking to our current situation and what may or may not happen with that. But it's also a book about emergent AI. And I don't want to give too much away there, but it's really drawing on the themes of how, because the people on New Sonora have been genetically engineered, there's a through line on Earth where they're basically treated as or called subhuman by the corporation. Like they build this into their marketing for the game so that people playing the game don't see them as human. And so when the people in the game start committing genocide and killing everyone on the planet, and it's hidden by the game, like they can't see it, but they still know what they're doing. That's pretty clear. And so the game is dehumanizing people. And so there are a lot of themes here that Dinniman is playing with. And he he has said in his subreddit, like the subreddit has gone back and forth with current politics. Like Dungeon Crawler Carl is very political, and the subreddit will be like, should we be political? Should we not? Dinniman came down saying, like, I don't want this to be a political place. I want you to be able to speak to talk about, the series and other things that you love. But it is a political series. Like I think you cannot read it without realizing what it's about. And he said, the thing is, I don't want to alienate anybody. I want somebody to come to my book and read it. And if it can change their mind, which seems increasingly hard to do, I want, I want that to happen. And so this is absolutely a fast paced lit RPG story. It's got a lot of themes that I think some people may think are way too overt. If you already agree with it, then you probably just roll with it. Other people might really just be banging against that the whole time. But I think that the scenario is set up on its own and it uses enough standard tropes of what this is. Like we've seen it before. It's basically cyberpunk, but in a colonial setting that I still think, anybody can enjoy this story. And I did. I really enjoyed it. Like I got to the end and I wanted there to be more. It's a standalone story, and I won't say that was dissatisfying because Dungeon Crawler Carl is now on, book 8, getting ready to be published in May. And there's a lot there. This is like encapsulates a lot of the ideas that are in Dungeon Crawler Carl. It doesn't have some of the secret sauce that I think makes Dungeon Crawler Carl, what it is. Like there's just so much character stuff in Dungeon Crawler Carl. Like there's so much opportunity for fun things. And this one is just a much tighter, closer story, which is great. Although, if you're coming to this, like I said, I think I would recommend Dungeon Crawler Carl rather than this one. And then if you had also read Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon as Dinniman's other standalone lit RPG, and that one left you a little bit traumatized because that's a pretty dark and nihilistic book that also uses game mechanics and gets super deep into how that game works and the things that you have to do. And it's a pretty off the wall game on what you do. Like you're basically trying to heal kaiju, giant monsters. And so you got to get inside them and fight viruses and do this whole thing. This game doesn't do that. Like it really is just, ground pounders fighting mechs. And it doesn't get into the mechanics of how the game works really, except that the mechs can be printed and they're brought down to the planet. And now we need to fight them with pretty conventional means, from rockets to pulse rifles to things like that. And so the whole time you kind of have the feeling that, well, wait a second, is this really a game? Is this really meant to be a game? Is that what Dinniman's doing? Like, is this a story where the NPCs are rising up against the players? Because there is the feeling of this, which is also, a trope in a lot of cozy lit RPG, is that we are going to live inside the life of the NPC and experience things with them as they kind of come awake and respond to the world that they've been stuck in or trapped in. You feel good at the end. And Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, like that was a bit of a downer. I'll just be honest about that. So this book is not that way. So I really enjoyed it. I obviously read it in 2 days because it just came out. And so there's just a lot to like in this book. And I think if you kind of treat it like Avatar, that's probably a good way to look at it. if you're a seasoned science fiction reader, there might be some frustrating things about it, but as a person who just loves a good story, it was a lot of fun, and that is a pretty easy recommendation to make. I do think there are some things that are gonna make this a hard sell, and I'm very excited that Dinniman has got this new deal. Like, he is such a success story of having gone from Royal Road and publishing things himself to Amazon and Kindle Unlimited to the massive success of that, being able to have a great relationship with his fans and incorporate feedback into the series of Dungeon Crawler Carl. And then now he's got this new deal with Ace, and his books are being, seen. Or I'm sorry, it's not Ace. I'm blanking on the name of the publisher, but it's a big publishing deal. But this cover, like, I kept looking at it thinking this is a horror story. Like, everything about this said horror to me. It looks like the main character's wearing a lab coat. He's got a pitchfork. The colors, like there's fire over the house. It looked to me like some kind of Texas Chainsaw Massacre kind of thing. And then Operation Bounce House, which speaks to the game that they're playing, to me is not saying science fiction, colonial science fiction, so there's just stuff there that I think is going to be. I look forward to what new covers are going to come out for this book that maybe tell you more about what it is and help sell the story more. I read it because I really like Dinniman. I think if I had seen this book from another author, like even reading the blurb, which it just would not have pulled me in. So I think look past that and just look to, you know, I'd really have to think about what I would do more for this cover, but I think it needs to say something about the planet and people fighting against mechs, or I really do like the current theme in covers of people standing in the foreground looking at some vista in the background of some cool place you can go look at, or in this case it could be the battle or the impending drop ships, or things like that coming to attack them. I think that would draw people in a lot more. The book also, it does deal with, what's essentially a genocide. There's ethnic cleansing happening on this planet. And while it doesn't get explicit about the violence, that is definitely there. So if that's a thing that you don't want to read about, it's not fully on the page, but it's happening. And it might be a little dissatisfying, I think, that the bad guy is ultimately, and I don't think this is not a spoiler because it's a thing, but the bad guy is ultimately the corporation, and everybody is caught up in what the corporation is doing. And so we never, I guess if I was going to do a sequel, I would want to see the characters go after the corporation because the corporation is who has created this situation. Everybody else is like a pawn of what the corporation is doing. I don't know what that would look like exactly, but I would like to see that. Probably once the book has had time to sit longer and it won't be, giving away too many spoilers to get too deep into it. I would love to look at this book on a more technical level as to how it opened, how the characters introduced, how Dinniman creates sympathy for them and also shows them being competent doing what they're doing, and then how the story unfolds and keeps you moving through it. I think those are all, like, there's some really polished and solid techniques there that just keep this story moving along. And also there's just some really great reversals if that's if you follow kind of the standard 5-act structure. I think it follows structure really well. And so that's a thing that I would like to dig into some more. So as a writer, there's things to enjoy here as well. So, okay, Operation Bounce House by Matt Dinniman. Go check it out. And if you have not read Dungeon Crawler Carl, read Dungeon Crawler Carl first. And then when you're hungering for more Matt Dinniman, you will read Operation Bounce House. And then if you're still hungry, do Kaiju Battlefield Surgeon, but don't say I didn't warn you, because that book is a pill. So um all right. I'd love to hear what you think about it if you've read the book already. And if there's other lit RPG that maybe straddles that line between being, really, I don't know. I just have a hard time reading a whole bunch of stats, and I have played plenty of games with stats. I want a story. I like to read about, gaming. I like to read the whole mechanism of how the game works. I just don't want to spend, it's not as interesting to me to do that, to read stats and things like that. And the whole level, like, I want leveling up to be in the character. And this is a book I think that just does all that really well. So, all right. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I will see you later.